So I came across this article today about the gas prices in California and why they're so much higher than everywhere else in the country. And I've also been going down this rabbit hole of economic policies, trying to understand for myself what are the short and long term impacts of various economic policies and how to understand that, how to think about the trade offs and implications. I read this book called Basic Economics, and it is a huge book with tons of examples about how economists think about the short term and long term ramifications of different policies. And the two big takeaways that I have from that: one, corporate greed is not a mechanism for higher prices. The way they think about it is corporations will always charge the highest price that the market will bear. They will always be maximally greedy. They're going to keep raising the prices until people stop buying the product, or until some other company sees how much money they're making off this product and says, hey, I can do the same thing. I can start making that product or a similar product and charge less. The only way that companies can actually have a long-term unfair profit margin is by either participating in a cartel, which is illegal, price fixing, that's illegal, or by some kind of government mandate or policy that allows them to operate in a non-competitive environment. The other thing that I learned from the book is when you implement a policy, you have to periodically check to see if the policy is doing what it was supposed to do in the first place, right? Because we voted for these policies to fix the environment. We don't actually know if it's doing good or not. We need to have some kind of measurement of, is this thing working? Or are we just wasting money? Or in some cases, is it having the opposite of the intended result? With that framework in mind, let's go to the article. It's called How California Regulated Itself into an Energy Crisis. I really like the writing style of this, so I'm just going to read directly a few sections. The last few months will likely be remembered as a watershed moment in California's testy gas price discourse. After years of blaming the state's eye-watering gas prices, the highest in the continental US, on big oil greed, California's elected officials have finally started taking seriously the idea that high pump prices are the result of their state's overly aggressive environmental policies. There's a press release from california.gov that says, Governor Newsom signs gas price gouging law. California took on big oil and won. So basically the premise was the oil companies were making so much money off of Californians because of price gouging, and they need to have more transparency in their financials to show that they were actually gouging the prices, and this was all just because of corporate greed. So they put in this bill about 2 years ago. Well, the law will go into effect in June 26th of 2023. If anything, gas prices are getting worse. So that was one narrative that was going on. The second thing she says is, in this paragraph, she says there are 2 oil refineries in California that are shutting down this year, and that's going to reduce the supply of gas to California by 20%. Because of that supply and demand shift, this study by USC business professor Michael Mischke projects that gas will soon shoot up to $8 a gallon. And the response is from people like this Assemblyman David Alvarez, a Democrat. We have a crisis on our hands that may be self-created. They're starting to shift the blame from the oil companies' price gouging to over-regulation of the oil industry in California. For about as long as it has had an environmental regime, the state of California has held that it is possible to pursue climate policy without inflicting economic harm. So I resonate with this a lot. This is the basic idea of California politics. You can have a good economy and also climate responsibility, let's call it that. And I think there's a balance between these things. We can be good to the planet and also make money at the same time. You can obviously go too far on one end or the other, right? Because if you wanted to be perfect and not do anything to the environment, and leave it exactly the way that you found it, yeah, obviously that's gonna hinder the economy. You can't build anything with that mindset. But we can say that we're gonna do the maximum amount of economic good with a minimum amount of climate damage. So I think there's a good balance between those things. And what they're saying now is possibly we've shifted a little bit too far in the favor of the climate. She says, this line is a fundamentally tough sell because the market-based solutions California has adopted must raise the price of fossil fuels in order to work. Agreed. By definition, adding regulation makes things less efficient. However, there's a balance, and we just have to find the right balance. The impending crisis will force California's environmental establishment to finally acknowledge and contend with the costs of the policies it has pursued. Okay, so then she explains what exactly are these environmental programs that are costing so much money for California drivers. How California arrived here can be understood as a story in 3 acts: the adoption of its boutique fuel requirement in 2003, the implementation of its 2 signature climate policies in the 2010s, and finally the post-pandemic refinery concentration accelerated by the environmental regime. Over time, the effects of state policy have built upon one another and compounded, resulting in high and volatile gas prices Californians experience today, about $1.50 higher than the US average. This is a really cool chart, and it shows, starting in the year 2000, what the difference, the premium just means the difference between what it costs in California and the rest of the country for gas, and then which parts can be attributed to these different things. 1, the California state tax. 2, in green here, is the environmental programs. And then 3 is everything else, unexplained by taxes or fees. Here you can see there's always been a state tax on gas. I think this, ever since I was a kid, we always kind of knew and accepted that California charges a tax on gas, and we were okay with it because it was about 20 cents per gallon, no big deal. And then in 2023, they implemented this extra fee, which was to make the gas more environmentally friendly, like less polluting gas. And that was supposed to be an extra 18 cents. And then there's all this other stuff that's unexplained by those 2 major factors. Less than 25 years ago, California gas prices were unremarkable. At the turn of the millennium, California gas retailed only about 35 cents above the national average in today's money. That was when I lived in California. That's what I remember. That difference was explained mostly by the state's higher taxes. This changed in 2003 with the phasing in of CARBOB, an ultra-low sulfur boutique gasoline blend mandated by the California Air Resources Board as part of its campaign to improve air quality. Cool. I think everybody was probably on board with this. 18 cents per gallon extra to have cleaner air seems like a small price to pay, right? I think that people, especially in California where there's tons of cars and there was a big pollution problem in the early 90s. I think everybody was probably on board with this. The second and perhaps more important factor was the effective islanding of the California market. CARBOB is only required in California and therefore produced regularly only by California refineries. So what happened was they made the special kind of gas that was better for the environment, but only California was buying it. Nobody else was willing to pay the extra 18 cents to get this better for the environment gas unless they had to. I think what they hoped would happen was that everybody else in the country would start to follow California's lead and say, okay, yes, 18 cents is a small price to pay. We are also going to transition to this cleaner gasoline. But that never played out. So basically, California is on an island. They're the only ones that use this very specific type of gasoline. And so the islanded market is predictably prone to price spikes. When there's a supply crunch, such as when a refinery suddenly goes offline after a fire or equipment failure, it typically takes at the very least 3 weeks for more CARBOB or blending components to be procured. Since nobody else in the country is using this special type of gas, there's nowhere to get it from. And then there's another weird thing. 2015 also marked the appearance of an additional California premium not explained by taxes and environmental fees, which Berkeley economist Severin Borenstein has dubbed the mystery gasoline surcharge. So the MGS emerged after a major explosion at Exxon's Torrance refinery in 2015, put the refinery out of commission for a year and a half. During that time, fuel distributors were forced to import unprecedented quantities of CARBOB from abroad, raising prices substantially. Even after Torrance became fully operational again, however, prices never fell back to a level that could be explained by state taxes and fees. Indeed, this mystery premium has stayed robust, averaging around 50 cents so far this year. So let's see if we can find it on here. 2015, there was this huge spike, and then yeah, so actually in before this, there were spikes of unexplainedness, but the gray there's been constantly some amount of extra unexplained premium on California gas ever since 2015. Borenstein's research has revealed that the MGS occurs not in the refining sector, but in the retail sector. That is, somewhere between gasoline being sold to retailers on the spot market and the price you see at the pump. So actually, the extra cost is at the gas station. Either the gas station has become less efficient, either I guess every gas station in the state has become less efficient, or is getting more profit than they used to the tune of about 50 cents a gallon, which is crazy. So why is this allowed to happen? Because I mean, in my life, if one gas station suddenly started charging 50 cents more in pure profit than another, I would just go down the street to the other gas station and save 50 cents. It's not possible for somebody to charge 50 cents extra just because they are greedy. They would either have to have a cartel of every gas station in the state of California, which is probably impossible and also illegal, or something else is going on here. Now, here's an interesting thing. Branded gasoline stations in California sell gasoline at about 23 cents more than unbranded gas stations. That means like the Chevron, the Shell, the Exxon, like these branded ones, for some reason are able to charge 23 cents more than the unbranded ones, which for me, I don't care. I just always go to the cheapest one. So I don't believe that this like Chevron with Techron, it cleans your engine. I don't believe that. I think they all are probably about the same. Okay, a gap that is only about 7 cents in the rest of the country. Yeah, so the rest of the country doesn't care. For some reason, Californians really want that special gas from the fancy companies. It also doesn't help that the market is undersupplied. The state has almost twice the number of drivers per gas station as the rest of the US. I don't know why that is. I didn't read this article. Okay, so there are some regulations. New gas stations have a limit on how much gas they can sell. The market is concentrated in a non-obvious way. Two competitors, Chevron and Marathon, supply about 40%, 49% of the market. Okay, so I read the article and it wasn't super clear why the state has almost twice the number of drivers per gas station as the rest of the US. A little bit because of regulation and a little bit because of competition. But yeah, that's not looking to change anytime soon. One working theory for the MGS is that California's increasingly frequent price spikes are contributing to the longer-term problem of elevated prices. Economists have long observed a phenomenon called rockets and feathers, in which retail prices shoot up when a commodity price spikes, but take much longer to return to baseline when the price drops, because retailers do not want to sell their inventory at a loss. It has also been shown that prices will take an even longer time to float down in an environment of local market power, which is plausibly the case in California retail gasoline market. Because these price spikes are much more frequent now, because California is on an island, the supply-demand relationship is much more volatile. That means these price spikes are very frequent and price rockets up and then starts to float down, but then rockets right back up again before it's coming back down to the true price. Okay, I buy that. Oh, here's an interesting thing. California's abundant oil resources are being left in the ground. I don't actually think of California as having a lot of oil resources, but I guess they do. So that's interesting. The oil's there, just we're not digging it up anymore because of the climate policies that are in place in California. So here's an interesting thing that I read. Back in like the 90s or early 2000s, everybody was saying, we're going to run out of oil. This was like a huge problem. It was an existential crisis that the US is dependent on foreign oil because all the oil in the world is running out. And by the year 2050, it will be completely gone. That was a little bit of a misclassification because what they were really saying is that it would no longer be profitable to drill for oil after 2050 because all the oil that's close to the surface would be gone by then. What happened in reality was they invented two types of drilling process. One, fracking. Everybody's heard of fracking, and then the other one is horizontal drilling. So by doing a combination of these two things, they opened up the accessibility to a lot more oil reserves. The oil reserves were always there. They just weren't profitable to extract them using the old methods. There's tons of oil out there. It's just not going to be profitable to extract. And what's going to happen is once that runs out, there will be more. It will just cost more to get it, and the price of gas will skyrocket. So we won't run out. It will just make the price of gas much higher, and then it won't make any sense to run our cars off gas anymore. I think that's the inflection point where electric cars will really take off, is when it just simply does not make sense to buy gas anymore because gas is like $40 a gallon. Okay, so I think transitioning to electric cars is inevitable. We just don't want to sit around and wait until all the oil in the world is burned up before we do it. So it helps to do it now. And we want to ease that transition. We don't want to be having power blackouts and in order to convince us that it's time to switch over. If we start switching over stuff now, it makes things a lot smoother when that supply starts to run dry. Okay, here we go. The spate of refinery closures California has seen over the past half decade and the serious prospect of more soon are about as strong of a refutation of Governor Newsom's corporate rapaciousness theory of high gas prices as possible. Okay, so that was a mouthful, but this is where we get into the meat of the article, which is rapaciousness. My vocabulary word for the day means basically just greed. So she's saying that all these refineries closing is a refutation of this theory of corporate greed theory, right? It's not that. If it were enormously profitable for oil refineries to do business in California, they would not be exiting the state at a record pace, right? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. They would not be shutting down their refineries if they were making tons of money off them. So it turns out that the alternate is probably more likely the case, which is that the cost of doing business in California, all these extra hoops that they have to jump through to sell to California, is just not worth the effort, the cost, the investment, whatever it is. And that's why they're all leaving California. Ironically enough, this will allow big oil to start extracting more profit. The departure of smaller refining enterprises from California has left the state's remaining CARBOB refining capacity in the hands of just a few big refiners, with three companies, Chevron, Marathon, and PBF, set to control over 90% of the state's refining capacity next year. There will be less competition now. There will be more profits for the oil companies that can remain in business, that stick it out, right? And, eventually maybe there will be only one, and it will have a monopoly if this trend continues. With a chronic supply deficit and little competition, California's remaining refiners will be able to sell CARBOB at unprecedented prices. Rather than protecting citizens from big oil, the state's policies have all but guaranteed more consumer harm at its behest. Okay. And the conclusion: California can reduce gas prices, but not without compromising on the state's environmental goals. Broadly speaking, California has two options for averting astronomical pump prices in the near term. It can drastically decrease demand or drastically increase supply. Now, a lot of people probably think that the demand is decreasing because of all the EVs. But unfortunately, this is crazy. Between 2023 and 2024, gasoline sales in California fell by only 1.12%, even though California has the most EVs out of any state. That's shocking and disappointing to me. I thought every time I go to California, I'm just like amazed how many EVs I see. And it has only made a 1% difference in the actual sales of gasoline. So it's like, what the heck is going on here? So yeah, they're about to lose 20% of their production capability, and the transition to EVs is only going to save 1% of the demand. It's a big problem. So basically, what she's saying is the only thing that they can do is allow California to use this standard gasoline that everybody else uses. The special gas that's supposed to be better for the air quality, we haven't quantified how much better it is. There's no conclusive study saying that this does what we want it to do. It's not, there's nothing to stand behind that says like cleaner gas is what we should keep at all costs. So I think what happened is originally when they put the law into effect and they said it's going to cost us about 18 cents more per gallon, everybody was on board with that, right? 18 cents per gallon sounds like a reasonable amount to pay for having clean air. But now, 25 years later, or 22 years later, we don't have any evidence that it's actually helping. We need to get that evidence. And it's costing way more than we thought. It's costing now over $1.50 a gallon more than other states. So we want clean air, but not at any price. There is a limit to how much we're willing to pay for the clean air, and we need some kind of proof that it's working, first of all. And then we need some kind of control to make sure that this trend doesn't just go out of control and continue forever. So very un-Californian thing to say, but I definitely believe that the environment is important, and we should do everything we can to keep it clean within reason. And so this is where we're kind of at a tipping point that it may be costing too much. And I wish I could say that this huge spike in costs for California gasoline was just driving everybody to buy EVs. And it seems like it was, but the data shows that it's only making a 1% difference in the total amount of gas burned in California. How is that even possible that California is buying so many EVs and yet only using 1% less gas than the year before? I don't get it. That just does not seem right to me. I'm gonna go check this one out. Okay, so quick update. I just went back to this website that they talked about, the fuel statistics and reports from ca.gov, and downloaded the report. And check this out. This is the total number of gallons of gas used in the state of California based on taxes. 15 billion gallons. But the cool thing is, during COVID, it went down by like 19% in 2020. And then it came back by about 10%, but it never went back to the 15 billion. It's now like in the 13 billions and dropping. So actually, that's kind of cool. That gives me a little bit more hope. And maybe the reason why 20% of California's refining capacity is going offline is because it never came back. It went down from starting at 15 billion gallons per year down to 13 billion and kind of stayed there, which is, I don't know, that looks like about 20% less than what it was originally. Let's see. Yeah, 86. So yeah, like 14% lower than it was, just 6 or 7 years ago. Maybe this is just responding to supply and demand, and it's maybe not such a bad thing. Of course, smaller numbers, it's going to still, like, the problem still exists. They're going to have even more spikes now, right? Because it's an even smaller island than it was before. Yeah, I just don't understand why this is not going down more rapidly due to electric cars alone. And maybe because this also said it includes aviation gasoline. So maybe that's why. Maybe a huge amount of it is just jets, which have probably gone up since then. Okay, fact check. This is, you can actually see the aviation split out, and it's in the 15 million range out of 15 billion. So about 0.1% of the total gas used in California. So insignificant. And actually, it was, this is COVID, it dropped down a little bit, went down, and then in 2024 spiked up. But still, like I said, in the big picture, not that important. We're going down little by little. Maybe I should go back to work at Tesla because we need to speed this up here quite a bit.